There are some days, admittedly, where I wish I had my own 3D camera, but then again, if I started making reviews with it, all I'd be doing is just trying to poke you guys with the 3D lenses. It would get irritating after a while, just like every horror movie that came out in the 80s that was made in 3D. Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for the third film in the Friday the 13th series, Friday the 13th Part 3, which you gotta love the title of most of these movies, how they're numbered Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, as if there's a continuing story in this series that's actually worth telling. But yeah, this movie came out in 1982, once again directed by Steve Miner, who directed the second movie and would later go on to direct Halloween H2O. And as you could tell by the title and the fact that I'm wearing these, the movie was made in 3D. And I'm gonna take these off right now because I am starting to get dizzy. Oh boy. So anyway, this movie is slightly different from the first two in the sense that it no longer revolves around a group of camp counselors, but rather a bunch of teens or college students heading to this lake house at Crystal Lake. And surprise, surprise, they get killed off one after another by Jason Voorhees. And it's worth noting that the movie takes place one day after the events of the second movie, and somehow Jason looks completely different than he did in the last movie. So on Tuesday, when I reviewed Part 2, I talked about how that movie introduced Jason Voorhees as the killer, but at the same time, it wasn't the version of Jason that everyone's familiar with because he's wearing the potato sack. And in this movie, this is the one where he officially becomes the Jason Voorhees that we all recognize and love. Well, not quite, but in the sense of the way he looks. This is the first movie where he gets his iconic hockey mask. And not only is this one of the most classic examples of a Friday the 13th movie, probably for all the wrong reasons, this is the definitive example of 80s horror that decided to go the 3D route. Because you also had movies like Amityville 3D and Jaws 3D. This movie was the first in that little trend of 80s 3D. And if you're judging this movie solely on its 3D aspects, it is hilarious. This movie doesn't waste any opportunity to just throw things at the camera in 3D. Whether it's yo-yos, whether it's people juggling apples, whether it's punching towards the camera, whether it's poking a stick at the camera, or whether it's Jason Voorhees shooting a spear gun right into the camera that's clearly on a string or a wire. This is hilarious in terms of its 3D aspects. And to be honest, that's the only reason to watch this movie. The other good thing about the movie is Jason himself. Like I said earlier, this is the movie where he gets his hockey mask, and I don't feel like this movie holds back on Jason as much as the last movie did. And Jason is a straight up beast, he's massive, he's tough, and again, like, this is the movie that introduced us to the look that we all recognize Jason with. And the very first shot where we see Jason walk on the dock with that spear gun in his hockey mask, that's like a history-making moment right there. I know it's Friday the 13th, but that really is an iconic moment within the franchise. The birth, pretty much. Well, again, sort of this iconic slasher villain. The rest of the movie can be summed up in one word: lazy. I know there's the 3D aspects. I know there's the handful of good kills in this movie. And I know there's the first appearance of Jason in his hockey mask. But outside of that, there's really nothing in this movie that's worth a damn. It really does have the exact same structure as the first two movies, with the intro kills, the sluggish pace, the finale with a couple of fake outs, and the ending where it's all a dream. It is just pure laziness, especially when it comes to this movie flat out ripping off the original movie that came out 2 years prior. And that's lazy in every sense of the word, that it rips off a movie that just came out 2 years ago. For example, the iconic Kevin Bacon murder from the original Friday the 13th movie is ripped off in this film and not done anywhere near as well. It's a more fake and bloodless version of that original kill, but funny enough, it follows something that I should mention because, you know, I'm me. It happens to one of the women in the movie whose only character trait is that she's pregnant. and it doesn't really go anywhere. But right before she gets killed, she's reading a Fangoria magazine. She reads an article on Tom Savini very briefly, which is ironic considering that they stole one of his favorite kills in the original movie. And then she flips the page to an article all about Godzilla. And of course, I would have to mention that. It's also worth mentioning because the director, Steve Miner, who directed the last movie, and as I mentioned, Halloween H2O, there was actually a point after this movie came out where he had the rights to Godzilla and wanted to make a movie called Godzilla King of the Monsters 3D. And the only reason it didn't get off the ground was because he couldn't get the funding, and eventually the rights went back to Toho, and they ended up making the Heisei Godzilla series. But to be honest, after seeing his 2 Friday movies and Halloween H2O, I'm so glad he didn't make a Godzilla movie because he's not that strong of a director. And one of the things that I've really noticed is that he really does like to make jump scares out of nothing. One of my biggest criticisms with Halloween H2O was that people will just walk up to Laurie Strode and then that's a jump scare. And he does that several times throughout not only that movie, Halloween H2O, but his 2 Friday the 13th movies, to where it's lazy, it's tired, and I absolutely hate it. Like, how can you make jump scares constantly of people just walking up to our main characters? How is that possible, and how is that allowed? And speaking of the characters, they're really not all that interesting either. They don't have any interesting traits. I don't find Chris as a final girl to be anywhere near as interesting as Ginny from Part 2. I mean, the actress does as good of a job as she can, but the character is just really bland. And some of the acting's flat out terrible. There's one moment in this movie where the acting is just flat out hilarious in terms of how bad it is. It's a moment in the movie where the stoner girl finds out that a lot of her friends are dead, and she's just walking around the house going, "Oh my god, oh my god, Shelly's dead, Shelly's dead," and it's, wow, like that is some horrific Razzie-worthy acting right there. And funny enough, this movie didn't get nominated for any Razzies. The closest that this movie has ever gotten to any sort of award is when Jason Voorhees was a nominated villain for the 2003 AFI's 100 Years list of heroes and villains. So hey, for a movie this trashy, that's quite an accomplishment for Jason to get nominated, at least. So out of all the Friday the 13th movies that I've seen so far, right, because there's a handful that I'm seeing for the first time in this series, this is the worst one for me. It's just lazy, it's predictable, it's cliched, it's unoriginal, it rips off everything from the original Friday the 13th movie, but doesn't do it any better. The opening kills of the movie are flat out pointless. The reason I say they're pointless is because they don't set up the events of the third movie. When you watch the original Friday the 13th, the 2 camp counselors in the 50s were killed because supposedly they were the ones that allowed Jason to drown in the lake. So that sets up the mythology of Crystal Lake and why it's considered to be a cursed place. In Part 2, the opening kill is Alice because it establishes Jason getting revenge on her, and it establishes that he's going to be the killer throughout the rest of the series. So those opening kills make sense in the last 2 movies. But with this movie, they don't. These 2 characters literally have nothing to do with the events that follow, and that's why I say that they're flat out pointless. It's just terrible. Now, I know some people are looking at this going, well, no, duh, it's a Friday the 13th movie. Of course it's terrible. But with this movie, it just gets to a point where it's terrible, but it's not really all that fun either. The only reason to ever watch this movie at all is in 3D. And I gotta say, right off the bat, the red and blue 3D that came with the original Blu-ray set, it actually doesn't look too bad. I watched segments of it in 3D, and it actually worked pretty well. As I'm recording this, I do not have the Screen Factory box set that has the third movie in real 3D that requires you to actually have a 3D TV and a 3D Blu-ray player. So I'm really curious to see how that looks in 3D, but the only problem is I don't have a 3D TV or a 3D Blu-ray player. I heard that the PlayStation VR allows you to watch movies in 3D. Is that really possible? If it is, let me know in the comments below, because if it is, I would love to see this movie in 3D. In real, actual 3D, not this 3D, which, again, is kind of effective. So as for a rating, don't waste your money on this. Again, the only reason to watch this movie is in 3D because you'll get a lot of joy out of seeing all the goofy elements of the 3D movie like this. Otherwise, it's just not worth it at all. It's really the worst movie of the series that I've seen so far. I know there are some movies coming up that are unanimously claimed to be the worst of the series, so I'm terrified. If this movie really is as bad as it is, I am scared to see how bad the other movies are, the ones that fans call the worst of the series. But yeah, there you go. That's my review for Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D. Now, next week, we're going to be moving on to a slightly better Friday the 13th movie. On Monday, I'll be reviewing the fourth film, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, which, spoiler alert, they made 8 more movies, so that's certainly aged well in terms of a title. But now I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.